Right. Well, thank you so much for coming today and for like meeting with me. So I have followed up with your business, the Sophisticated Marketing Solutions business,
Mhm.
and about like your leadership and your multicultural marketing, it really stood out to me. So I wanted to ask you several questions about how you got here and all of that. So would that be good with you?
Yes, that's perfectly fine.
All right, perfect. So I would like to start off with knowing a little bit about your background. So what initially drew you to the world of marketing and how did you lead to the founding of your own agency?
Yeah, so a couple of different ways that happened. I was a regional sales director for a telecom company. So I did a lot of traveling and just a lot of sales, right?
Yeah,
And sales management, and it's kind of a stressful job, and having to meet certain quotas, and um, so. I decided to just go back to school and just always had some little bit of interest in marketing, right? It's kind of, they go hand in hand, right? Sales and marketing, but it's not as aggressive as making sure that you're selling and hitting certain goals, right? A little bit different. So that's initially how I got into marketing as I went back to school, got my bachelor's and then my master's in marketing. And shortly after I graduated, I left sales and got a job in marketing. So,
that's
yeah.
great. That's great. Yeah, we kind of have like a little bit of a similarity there because I actually started off with a biology major.
Hmm.
And then I've always had a passion for marketing. That I just every time I had like a club or something, I would try to participate in like helping with their Instagrams or helping with their flyers or something, anything related to marketing, I
Mhm.
was always trying to be part of. Um, so then after some time, I completed my bachelor's in biology and everything, but then I was like, kind of like marketing more. That's more of my thing. So that's when I finally
Yeah.
decided to go into my master's in marketing.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, yeah. So, good choice.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely love it. So, as the founder and CEO, what are some of the most important decisions you make on a regular basis?
Um, so there's a lot, right? And I think one of your previous questions was what got me to kind of start the business. And
That's easy one.
some of that was obviously, working for a large company and realizing that you can do a lot of what large companies do to an extent at much lower rates. Especially that particular company had small clients up to enterprise level clients, and obviously smaller clients didn't get a lot of attention. They were just a number, right?
Yeah.
And large agencies work this way where you lose a client and that's fine. Here's another account that just gets added to your book, especially a publicly traded company like this. So um, that's initially what kind of got me the idea of, well, we can serve small businesses or even SMBs, you know, with exactly the same type of technology, but with more of a personalized feel, right? And a customized solution for each individual client. So, and obviously at a much lower rate, right? So,
Yeah.
and that's ideally who our target audience is those SMBs versus enterprise level clients. So,
Hmm.
um, you know, dealing with, running a small business, you make a lot of decisions, some more important than others, but when you first initially start, you kind of want to take on anything that comes at you, right? Just because you want the ability to say you have those clients, and whether it's for cash flow or whether it's just to say I have clients now. Um, but it's not always the right decision, right? And as you mature as a company, you start to learn to say no,
Hmm.
and learn to spot those clients that may be trouble, unfortunately. And you have to really, sometimes say no, even though that's revenue that could be lost. Um, it's just sometimes not a good fit, right? So those are always tough decisions. Being able to tell the client that we just don't think it's a right fit. Um, And it's sometimes the same thing with employees is, you know, they may not be managing an account properly, and having to kind of be firm in a way, if especially if you've had coaching sessions with them, and you mentioned the importance of certain counts, but um, you know, the I guess the ability to move an account from someone's book into someone else can kind of be demoralizing to some individuals, right? And they see it as a failure. So it's
Mm,
important how you deliver that, but it's something that, that's not always easy. So if I went to one individual and I had a conversation that moved that account out of their name into another employee, then it's tough, right?
yeah,
Because you know that you're not terminating, but you're like, you're obviously not happy with the performance of it,
yeah,
and you have to make that decision, which is best for the company sometimes. So
yeah. But then you're like worried that you hurt somebody's feelings and stuff.
yeah.
Understandable. Yeah, that can be very tough. Um, how would you describe your approach to multicultural marketing, and what do you believe most brands are still getting wrong?
So I think a lot of it, when it comes to multicultural marketing, that could be very broad, right? Um, and you know, I guess in the beginning for small companies, they may be wanting to take on clients to target particular audiences and certain cultures, and that's when they're learning to say no sometimes, right? Because if it doesn't fall into, something that you can deliver to the client, then you just have to say no, because at the end, both sides are going to be hurting, both your
Mhm.
agency because they're unhappy, and obviously the business. So um, that's important. And then well, there was a second part to your question, wasn't there?
Yeah, so what do you believe most brands are still doing wrong?
Um, so I think what most brands are probably doing wrong when it comes to that is not really doing the proper research on how certain target audiences want to be, either the messaging or how they want to be targeted and what channels, right? So
Mhm.
there are brands out there that do a good job, and there's other brands that um, may not be doing the proper research prior to going into marketing to that particular culture. And I guess a really good example could be the Latinx, right? Which
Mhm.
you've heard, you know, when companies started marketing, using that term as an example, there was a large population of people in the Hispanic community and Latin community that just didn't agree with that term, right? It's just not a term that they ever use,
Mhm.
or that they don't even use or have even heard of, and all of a sudden you have a culture or a brand that starts to mention them in that way, right? And they're not used to it, and it's like, well, is this a term that all of a sudden now you're trying to use to market to us, right? So, I think companies that did a poor job of doing their proper research and identifying how those cultures would respond to that was a poor job on their end. And until to this day, because we're part of like the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce here in the Phoenix area, and a lot of us kind of joke about it right now, right? Like that they use that term, and no one was comfortable. I mean, there may have been a select few that were fine with it, but I think for the most part, as a whole, if certain brands would have done the proper research to see how that culture would have reacted to all of a sudden being labeled a certain term that had not been used in the past, and
Mhm.
then they probably wouldn't have used it, right? So, and you're starting to see less of it being used, and for a period of time, it was used a lot. So,
Mhm.
um, so I think not truly understanding the culture that they're targeting, whether it's lack of research or lack of understanding, then that's where they kind of fall short when it comes to that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Can you share a campaign you're especially proud of and what made it so successful?
Yeah, I think we have a lot of examples of those, right? When it comes to successful campaigns and why we're proud, I think it's mainly those small businesses that are struggling to generate leads or struggling in sales and struggling in revenue. And they look at, advertising channels as a form of, okay, we know it exists and
Mhm.
let's put our, money that they either may not currently have or, they budget for it and to try to generate leads to grow our business. And we've had multiple cases to where we've been successful. And we can't say for all, right? Because there's been cases where we're not successful, but where we're successful and it's not just our success, but it's the client's success,
Of course.
right? They're able to generate new clients and new customers and new sales and based off of our advertising efforts. So it's good to see, and we're proud of that because we can say, that maybe we helped a company stay in business, or maybe we helped the companies grow. We
Hmm.
were able to help companies generate revenue, whether it's to pay, pay for payroll or for anything else, right? Maybe, as far as, maybe it's to put food on their table. We don't know, right?
Yeah.
But it's a good feeling when you know that you're helping another business grow as well. And they're small businesses too. So versus an enterprise level company, say Walmart, right, where they may lose millions of dollars on certain advertising campaigns, but it's not a big deal to them. I mean, it's a big deal, but it's not, it doesn't
It doesn't like
cause them to shut down and go out of
Mhm.
business, right? So yeah.
Okay, yeah, yeah. It's a very good like feeling when you feel like you have helped somebody achieve something so big.
Yeah, and especially when we get emails from clients that have really positive feedback and
Hmm.
can tell us, hey, we were able to get, you know, new sales or new clients or new customers from our efforts, and that means a lot more to us than even
Hmm.
positive reviews or even, you know, extending a contract or anything. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, how do you keep your marketing strategies fresh and responsive to shifting customers' trends?
Yeah, so a lot of that is just us knowing that we need to be resilient. And by that I mean that, and that's one of our core values is knowing that this industry is changing, right?
Mhm.
And it changes in many ways. The technology changes, the platforms change, the way consumers shop and search changes, the way they digest information changes, right? The way that, there's so many changes, and knowing that we need to always be aware of that change and be constantly learning and be up to date on something that may have worked a couple years ago, may no longer work now,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So and we need to be open to other channels and different things. TikTok is a really good example of it, right? It's a couple years ago, a lot of agencies just didn't have an interest in TikTok, right? It's just, oh, well, it's another social media channel for young
Yeah.
kids to waste their time, right? But um, that demographics is changing. And a lot of clients, their target audiences are now on that particular channel. So that opens up a whole new door of, where there was resistance, now there's an opportunity
Hmm.
to reach our target audience because well, not ours, but our clients, right?
Yeah.
That's where their target audience may be. Um, so just being, resilient to know that you constantly have to keep up with changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, now like TikTok even added the TikTok shop as well.
Hmm.
Like, it's expanding. Everything is
Yeah,
changing.
it's a platform that generates revenue off of advertising, right? And that's unfortunately all platforms eventually go to that. Reddit is another good example, where you can advertise on Reddit, right? And if your target audience is on that particular channel, then um, we can't just say no, we don't want to advertise on that, whether we like the platform or we have no experience on it. If that's where the target audience is, then um, then that's an opportunity. So,
Of course, of course. What challenges are you seeing right now in the marketing world, and how are you navigating them?
I think the biggest challenge is AI, generative AI, and the popularity of that. Whether, I mean, it's a good thing, but at the same time, I think it puts us as as marketers and as agencies in a tough position because you do have a lot of you know small businesses that may not have too much money to hire an agency or hire a marketer, and now with the ability to just utilize some of these generative AI platforms, that removes us from it, right? But it still requires a level of expertise to be effective in those channels, right? So it's a big challenge having that conversation on, well, why should I hire a content creator, right, to develop content for blogs, as an example, when I can have ChatGPT or Gemini or any of these other platforms just develop that for me, right?
Yeah, of course.
So that's obviously a challenge. Platforms are obviously starting to integrate a lot of that generative AI into their platforms as well. So what feels like sometimes marketers are being taken out of it, it's still important, right? That we're involved, and um, some clients don't understand that, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah,
absolutely. So it's kind of like educating the client as to what you can do to help them further.
yeah, exactly. So
Mhm.
just the challenges of now having that conversation with
Mhm.
about generative AI. Um, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. When building or mentoring a team, what characteristics or skills do you find most valuable?
I think the biggest are soft skills, right? As I mentioned earlier, things are constantly changing
Hmm.
in this industry. So um, I may have learned something 5, 10 years ago, but those skills may not be as relevant anymore, right? So knowing that I need to go in and learn a new platform or learn new
Hmm.
skills. So that's where soft skills come in, right? The ability to find individuals that are self-motivated and are willing to go out and learn without having to be told, hey, um, you need to learn this, right? Um, they're able to communicate well. There's a lot of soft skills that we can look at, right?
Hmm.
That because we can teach people skills and we can teach people how to manage accounts and platforms, and what we can't teach them is how to think outside the box sometimes, right? And how to strategize and how to, you know, say, look at more of like the bigger picture and and really think about different ideas, because sometimes that's what it involves. It's not just, but this is what I do every single client, but it's like maybe step back and say, okay, um, I need to really think about what else we can do. How can we be creative to make this account work?
Hmm. Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
What would you say is the most underrated skill for someone pursuing a career in marketing today?
Um, I would say, I don't know if it's the most underrated skill, but I would say is communication, right? Because even if you're, on the back end of marketing, right, whether that's you're a graphic designer or whether you're a data analyst or even a PPC strategist, right, or
Mhm.
an SEO strategist, is you still have the ability to be able to communicate some of that more technical stuff into language that the end user or um, whoever it is you're trying to relate that, but it could not necessarily an end user, but it could be any stakeholder, right? Um,
Mhm.
to information that they understand. If you go in and you just start, whether it's a phone call or whether it's by email or a conversation about metrics and certain things that they have no clue what any of that means, right? Or how that really impacts them, and being able to communicate that to them in a way that they understand how it impacts their business, or even if it's not their business, on how it impacts or has an effect on everything, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So the communication is important.
Hmm.
both written, oral, right, obviously.
Yeah.
But written is a big part because more and more companies are just going to, where it's all just email and it's all,
Hmm.
in some cases, even text or through chat platforms, right? So even project management platforms like Asana and Monday and all of these other project management platforms that companies use to communicate internally and in some cases even externally. Um, you need to be able to go in and communicate that properly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I
yeah.
definitely see how that can be very important. Um, if you could go back to the beginning of your career, is there anything you would have done differently?
Um, let's see. I think I would have started this company earlier.
Yeah.
Um, but um, I don't know. I guess it's hard to say, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
because if there's things that you change in the past, then that may
Have
we
affected the future.
yeah, we may think that it may have some positive effect, but in the long run it
Hmm.
may, so um I I guess that one of the things is at least personally is I stayed away from social media marketing a lot, right? Early on, just because um, I guess mentally, I kind of thought maybe it was more of a fad and it would go away. And, you
Yeah.
know, who wants to hire an influencer, right? To market, even, major brands, right? But
Mm-hmm.
no, that's completely shifted to where influencers are being hired by major brands, right? Um, and a lot of brands are now looking at influencers as a way of marketing. So
Yeah.
that's something that we always kind of just dismissed early on. So
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I see. Yeah, we actually had like a little simulation that actually included influencers too, where we had to
mm,
like basically pay influencers and stuff um
mhm.
to help with the marketing. So yeah, it's definitely being thrown into marketing now.
Yeah, yeah, and it makes sense because if their target audience is on a certain platform and that influencer can reach that audience
Hmm.
in scale, then it makes sense to
Yeah,
to do that.
yeah,
So.
exactly. Are there any resources like books, leaders, or habits that have influenced your success in the leadership style?
Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I have a ton of books, right? And I've
Yeah.
gotten rid of a lot in the past. And in fact, today's meeting that I went to was about this book
Oh,
called
wow.
Never Eat Alone.
Yeah.
Um, so I do a lot of reading. I
Mhm.
always have. I would say that a lot of them are very similar. They all give very similar, um, I guess, suggestions or, so I wouldn't say there's any one particular book, right? Because they all have a very similar theme, and it's individuals who have um, taken some of these tactics or strategies or whatever and just really lived them, right? So,
Yeah, yeah.
but they're all very similar when you think about it. So,
Hmm.
um, you know, I think at a younger age, I probably would have started implementing some of that, right? It's not a manual to where you can just say, okay, I'm going to do this today and that's going to change.
Hmm.
It's more of just, I'll give you a good example in that particular book. There's a chapter on 10 tips on how to, um, what was it here? I'm in that chapter. We just finished it. Sorry. So 10 tips on how to be interesting, right? To
Okay.
really stand out,
Yeah.
whether it's in an organization or in your field of work. And one of the things which you wouldn't believe was in there was to be healthy, right? Um,
Mhm.
and I've read a lot of books that talk about like taking care of yourself first,
Yeah.
mentally and and
Mhm.
and and physically. And because it all starts with yourself, right?
Yes.
If you're not confident, if you know, because of whatever reasons of your health issues or mental issues, then and issues probably is a bad word to use, right? But um, they all kind of go back to where, you know, taking care of yourself first is important.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
I think as business owners, you struggle with that. And you tend to forget about that because you're always chasing that client, you're always chasing, trying to grow, and you forget
Yeah.
about yourself. So, um, getting the proper amount of sleep,
Mm-hmm.
trying to eat healthy, as much as I love to eat, right? That's always a challenge for me. But
Yeah,
because at the end, everything you do, if you don't have your health, right, then it doesn't matter.
exactly.
Um, so they're all very similar, you know, and I've read multiple books that talk about that as well.
Mm,
Um, so none in particular because you know, you'll have random people that say this is the one book that I recommend. You'll have other people that say this is the one I recommend, and you know, it's the one that you feel more, you know, has an impact on you when you read it. So,
absolutely.
yeah. But there's tons of books out there. I mean,
So
you know,
many.
there's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, well, those are all my questions. I really appreciate you taking your time to meet with me. And I really hope that we can continue staying connected. This was super insightful, very helpful. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, no problem.